do. We still do. We still do.
Still do after all this time at the altar. I alter my mind and vow to God I love you till he make his return. The rain should be the least of your concern. Under God's umbrella, I promise to provide and preserve his word.
Last week we talked about this idea of like it starts at the altar, but then because it's the starting point, we have to be intentional or we drift.
Yeah.
And so there's a need to understand exactly what the altar is, because it's not just called an altar for fun's sake. Like it's something that was understood very, very well as a place where something specific happens. And so now I want to kick it back off to you.
Oh, thank you.
What happens at that place?
So we see a lot of altars being built in the altar or in the Bible. We see a lot of altars being built in the Bible. But I want to start with Genesis 12:8. Abraham built an altar to the Lord, and he called on the name of the Lord. And so whenever there was an altar built throughout scripture, we know that it was a moment of transition. There was a moment of direction. And it associated often with worship, with sacrifice, with covenant making, and with divine encounters. When I think of the altar, I can't help but to think of when Abraham had to build an altar and like the Lord was calling him for Isaac. Often we see where there was an altar built and they were sacrificing something unto the Lord. And so just think of that. Like we're starting marriage. A lot of times they walk down the aisle to the altar. This is the starting point. It's a huge point of transition in terms of a big life transition that's happening. But marriage requires sacrifice. It's also sacred. And you have to die. And I know I jokingly say that we say it's a wedding, but it should be a funeral because you do have to die to yourself to put someone else before you and to consider them above yourself and to be able to share in the vision that you guys have. It can't just be your way and that's it. There has to be a joining of the two. And so just thinking of the sacrifice and the sacredness of what the altar represented, but it was also this meeting place with God. And so it marked a new beginning. And of course, we know that is the true to be in marriage. But I think of a new year, that's also a new beginning. I think of us hitting 8 years of marriage, that's also a new beginning. And so, although we're starting at the beginning being the altar, it doesn't mean there are not often seasons that come in marriage where we get to experience a fresh start, a reset, a new beginning. God gave direction, and it was also a public declaration of allegiance that happened. And so, it wasn't the end of a journey, but it was the place where direction was clarified and given.
Yes, and the altar, like it also signified a place where this is like not only am I making this commitment to you before God, but I'm also making a covenant with God. Like sometimes scripturally, sometimes when we talk about the altar, there was this breaking of an animal in half, and the person would walk through the broken halves. And when you think about it, we are two people at the altar, and we're inviting God in the middle, in the center of our marriage. And so when we invite him in the center, what we're saying is, God, you have this influence in my marriage, and I'm going to allow you to have the influence. And so when we think about living life beyond the altar, one of the things that we have to do is we have to guard this this unity between all three. And so in Ephesians 4, I absolutely love this scripture because it talks about what it looks like to remain like in one flesh. And it talks about how, we are to maintain the unity of the spirit through the bond of peace. And all the work that we're doing is to maintain this bond of peace. And so when we think about the altar, like all of the work is going to maintaining this bond of peace, and that's what it looks like year in, year out.
So talk about vision is not something that's a feeling. Can you share more about the frameworks of vision and what that looks like?
Yeah, That's the statement there. Like you can drop mic, go home. Like we can just
Vision
leave it
is
on.
not a feeling; it's a framework.
Vision is not a feeling; it is a framework because the vision gives us direction. Direction can't be. Direction cannot be attained by just emotion alone. Emotions are beautiful. Emotions color life for us. But when emotions are in the driver's seat, we find ourselves going in the wrong direction because emotions are used as reactions. Like emotions are chemical reactions, like the E in motion. The E stands for energy. The motion, the root word is mote, which deals with movement. And so when you think about emotion, there's this energy that's in motion that's reacting to something that happened. And so it's a reaction that naturally happens, and it's something that happens before you think about it. So if emotions are what we use to move towards the vision, we're going to constantly go with our emotions because they're so up and down. They're so we can have so much color in the world, but they're not to drive us. Emotions can't be the leader in the framework. Vision has a system that it follows, and the decisions that we need to make for the vision, like we need to be able to work in and out of what comes up when we need to make certain decisions. If you have a financial decision you need to make for your marriage, you can't be led by emotions, because if you feel depressed, if you're anxious, you're going to make decisions based off of what you feel, not the vision. If you say I do and your partner frustrates you, or y'all just been having a rough week, if you continue to allow emotions to keep you from engaging in the conversations that's needed, you'll find yourselves, as you said earlier, drifting, and you wonder how you get 20 years, 30 years down the line and your kids have moved on, they're gone with their families, or they moved out, and all of a sudden you wonder, why am I not happy? Like, how did we get here? It's because one situation turned into another, another turned into another being swept under the rug, another being turned into like we're not connecting. And so the vision can't be uh can't be driven by your emotions. They are a part of it, and your emotions do tell a very, very real story, especially about your experience. But emotions need to be understood. If they're not processed, if they're not understood, you're going to continue to make decisions that lead you in places you don't want to be, especially in your marriage.
Yeah. I think that's good. And I think when it comes to vision, areas that we must revisit continually throughout our marriage is, what does that look like with God in terms of our spiritual alignment, our shared values? What does that look like with communication? How we make decisions, as you were sharing, how conflict, what we're going to do, how we're going to navigate that, and how our needs are expressed. And then I also think connection is something that you have to revisit often. And physical intimacy, friendship, and also in emotional closeness. And so when it comes to this vision and what that looks like, I think these are 3 key areas that you can continuously revisit through the different seasons that we experience in marriage.
Which is, it's almost like that reverse engineering that we talked about again, because it's like God really is the giver of the vision. You know, like the original marriage back in Genesis 2, like he's telling us what the original design was. And so for us, we go before him, we say I do, to maintain to get to where we want to go, so we're on the same page and aligned. We have to be able to communicate in an effective way. And in order to communicate in an effective way, we have to be connected. If we are disconnected communicating, that's disastrous.
Yeah.
When we're communicating from constant frustration, when we're communicating from a place of like being sad, and we're not communicating exactly what our need is in that, we find ourselves talking about the wrong thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So understanding what we need to communicate about is helpful when we are connected. A lot of times the connection really is the issue of what drives us away from the vision.
Never and always gonna love you and always. No doubt you're my blessing. Ain't no second guessing. No one can separate.